The mall, after dark. Empty halls, flickering lights, and the absolute wrongness of a place meant for crowds, now utterly silent. Tonight, we plunge into the real-life horrors faced by those who work the night shift. You think you know quiet? You think you know loneliness? These people experience something far, far worse. From the chilling account of the mannequin that moved, to the truly disturbing secrets of Lost and Found in Department 7 and the phantom activity of the echoes of closing. If you've ever felt that unsettling dread in the quiet of the night, get ready for these first-hand accounts. Because the mall has secrets, and they only reveal themselves when everyone else is gone. Every night, the mall held its breath, and with each shift, a new terror unfolded. Make sure you're subscribed so you're ready for the unsettling truth of what happens after closing. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of night where the world outside felt hushed and indifferent, and inside, the fluorescent lights of the deserted Northwood Mall hummed with a sterile and tireless energy. I'd been working the overnight shift as a janitor here for almost 5 years. 5 years of waxing floors, emptying trash, and cleaning up spilled popcorn from moviegoers long gone home. You get used to the quiet, the vast emptiness of a place designed for crowds, now silent. It becomes almost comforting, a steady rhythm of work and solitude. My shift usually started around 11 p.m., after the last movie let out and the few remaining stragglers drifted out. By midnight, it was just me, the security guard, usually Old Man Peterson, who spent most of his time dozing in his office, and the occasional ghost of a sales associate rushing out the door. The mall in those hours was a world unto itself. The bright, cheerful storefronts looked strangely eerie in the muted overnight lighting, like sleeping giants waiting for dawn. Most nights were uneventful. I'd put on my headphones, listen to an old podcast, and just get on with it. But one night, about 2 years ago now, the quiet felt different. It was heavy, like a blanket thrown over everything, muffling even the distant hum of the ventilation system. I remember it was late spring, and a cool breeze had somehow slipped into the usually stuffy service corridors, raising the fine hairs on my arms. I was working my way through the fashion wing, Section D, near Chic Style, one of those boutiques that always had mannequins positioned in dramatic poses right by the entrance. They were always a bit creepy, I thought, their blank faces and fixed smiles, but you learned to ignore them, just part of the scenery. I had just finished buffing the floor in front of trendy threads and was moving towards Chic Style. My mop bucket rattled a little as I pushed it, the only sound apart from my own breathing. As I approached Chic Style, I glanced at the display window. There were 3 mannequins, 2 women and 1 male, all dressed in summery outfits. Nothing out of the ordinary. I pulled out my key, unlocked the security gate, and slid it open. The smell of new clothes and something vaguely floral wafted out. As I stepped inside, I swear, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The female mannequin closest to the entrance, the one with the bright red scarf, seemed to shift, just a little. A slight tilt of the head, perhaps, or a subtle repositioning of a hand I froze. "Whoa," I muttered, pulling off my headphones. The sudden silence was deafening. I looked directly at it. Everything was still. The mannequin stood exactly as it always did, frozen in its silent, plastic pose. Must be tired, I told myself, rubbing my eyes. Or the lights playing tricks. The mall lights could be odd sometimes, creating strange shadows. I pushed the mop bucket further in, trying to dismiss it. I started cleaning the floors inside, working with my back to the mannequins, trying to focus on the rhythmic swish of the mop. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was a prickle on the back of my neck, a sense of an unseen gaze. Every few minutes, I'd turn sharply, catching nothing but the unmoving figures. About 20 minutes passed. I was halfway through the store, near the changing rooms, when a soft, almost imperceptible sound reached my ears. It was like a faint shuffling, a drag, not a loud sound, just enough to make me pause. My heart gave a little thump. I turned slowly, my mop suspended in midair, and there it was, the mannequin with the red scarf. It had moved. Not a lot, but undeniably. Its left arm, which had been bent at the elbow with the hand resting on its hip, was now subtly lowered, hanging at its side. And its head was tilted slightly more to the left, as if it were now looking directly at me. My breath hitched. My hands felt cold, clammy. This wasn't a trick of the light. This wasn't my imagination. This was real. I stood there, staring, a wave of cold dread washing over me. The mannequin's expressionless face felt incredibly menacing now, its plastic eyes seemingly fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. I wanted to run, to scream, but my feet felt rooted to the polished floor. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the male mannequin, positioned behind the first one, began to turn. Its body pivoted slowly, silently on its base. The movement was so fluid, so eerily natural, it defied its solid, inanimate form. Its blank face was rotating, its gaze shifting from the display window to me. A choked sound escaped my throat. I dropped the mop. The loud clatter echoed through the silent store, a jarring testament to my panic. I scrambled backwards, tripping over my own feet, my eyes wide and fixed on the two figures. They were still, frozen. But I knew, with a horrifying certainty, they had moved. They had been watching my heart hammered against my ribs. Fight or flight kicked in, mostly flight. I didn't even grab my mop. I just fumbled for the security gate, my fingers trembling so much I almost couldn't unlock it. I yanked it open, pushed through, and scrambled out into the main mall corridor without even bothering to close it properly. I didn't stop until I burst into Peterson's office, gasping for breath. He looked up, startled, his spectacles askew on his nose. "What in tarnation, Mark? You seen a ghost?" he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. I tried to tell him I really did, but the words got stuck in my throat. All I could manage was a few choked, incoherent sounds, pointing vaguely back toward the fashion wing. Peterson, bless his old heart, just chuckled. "Rough night, huh? Take a break, son. Go get some coffee." He didn't believe me, of course. Who would? Mannequins don't move. I did go get some coffee. I stayed in the break room, watching the security cameras on the small monitor, but the chic-style camera was static still. Nothing moved. I never went back into that store alone that night. I waited until Peterson came with me on his morning rounds. When we finally entered chic style, the mannequins were exactly as they always were. The red scarf one had its arm bent at the elbow again. The male one was facing the window. Everything was in its place. I finished my shift that morning in a daze. I've continued to work the night shift at the mall, but I avoid the fashion wing if I can help it. And when I have to go near chic style, I make sure to clean that area as quickly as possible, never looking directly at the mannequins, always keeping them in my peripheral vision. Sometimes, late at night, when the mall is silent and still, I can still feel it. That prickle on the back of my neck, that feeling of being watched, and I'm always listening for that faint shuffle, that slight drag, because I know what I saw. And I know those mannequins were more than just plastic and paint. They were watching. And I have a feeling they still are. The chill of the air conditioning always hit me first, a dry, artificial breeze that smelled faintly of cleaning solution and stale popcorn. It was 11 p.m., and the grand glass doors of the Northwood Mall had just locked, sealing me inside for another night shift. Most people dreaded the graveyard shift, but I'd grown to appreciate the quiet. No screaming kids, no insistent shoppers, just the low hum of the mall's unseen mechanisms and the soft glow of emergency lights. It was peaceful, almost meditative. My job was straightforward. Walk the entire perimeter, check for anything out of place, ensure all doors were secure, and monitor the security cameras. I'd done it for nearly 3 years, countless nights of mind-numbing repetition, broken only by the occasional fire alarm test or a curious raccoon trying to get into the food court dumpsters. Tonight, however, felt different. It started subtly, maybe a week ago. A flicker in the corner of my eye. I'd be passing the brightly lit storefront of Trendy Threads, with its mannequins frozen in awkward poses, and I'd swear one of them had shifted just a millimeter. Or I'd be in the echoing vastness of the central atrium, and a sound, a whisper, a rustle would ghost past my ear, too faint to be real. I'd chalked it up to fatigue, the brain playing tricks in the stillness. But then, the noises became clearer. The mall's soundtrack during the day was a cacophony of cheerful pop music. At night, it was silence. A deep, resounding silence. So, when I heard it, walking past the defunct arcade just before midnight, it made me freeze. It was a faint, tinny melody, like a music box playing from a great distance. It would last only a few seconds, then vanish. I'd check the cameras, rewind the footage, but there was nothing. Just the empty, brightly lit corridors. One particular night, the feeling intensified. I was doing my usual rounds, flashlight cutting through the dimness of the service hallways behind the stores. The air was colder than usual, a damp chill that raised goosebumps. As I approached the entrance to the old department store, the one that had been vacant for years, a dark, gaping maw of a space, I heard it distinctly. Not the music box, not a whisper, but a thump. Like something heavy had fallen, my heart gave a little jolt. Raccoons didn't usually make that kind of noise. I flicked my flashlight beam into the darkness of the old department store. Dust motes danced in the light, but nothing moved. I started to tell myself it was the building settling, or maybe rodents. But a prickle of unease ran down my spine. I decided to ignore it and continue my rounds. The next night, I was in the food court, finishing my coffee break, scrolling through my phone. Suddenly, a distant clank. It was metallic, sharp. It sounded like it came from the upper level, near the children's play area, where that giant, brightly colored climbing structure was. My gut clenched. I knew that sound. It was the sound of a metal latch clicking. I got up, my chair scraping loudly. I walked slowly towards the escalator, my eyes scanning the vacant tables. No one, nothing. When I got to the top, still no sign of anything. But as I passed the play area, a faint, sweet smell hit me. Like cotton candy, but oddly cloying, almost putrid. It made my stomach churn. I quickly moved on. The real shift happened last night. I was doing my final patrol, just before my relief arrived at 6 a.m. The mall was at its darkest, the emergency lights casting long, eerie shadows. As I walked past the entrance to the old department store again, the one with the empty space, I saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible glow emanating from deep within the darkened store. It was a soft, flickering light, too consistent to be a reflection, too steady to be anything natural. My breath hitched. I stood there, rooted to the spot, for what felt like an eternity. The light pulsed, slowly, like a heartbeat. Then, just as I was about to reach for my radio, it clicked off, plunging the store back into absolute blackness. My hand was shaking. I shone my powerful flashlight directly at the entrance, blinding myself in the reflection for a moment. Nothing but darkness. I don't know what came over me, but instead of calling it in, instead of running, I felt an inexplicable pull. A terrifying curiosity. I approached the entrance, my steps slow and deliberate, each one echoing in the silent mall. The air grew colder, the cotton candy smell stronger, almost overwhelming now. It seemed to be seeping out from the old store. I pushed open the door a crack. It groaned on its rusted hinges, a sound like a creature waking. The darkness inside was absolute, a void. I raised my flashlight, aiming it into the abyss. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating dust-shrouded display cases, empty clothing racks, and the ghostly outlines of what were once bustling aisles. Then, there it was. Just beyond the range of my flashlight, deep within the department store, I saw it again. The flickering glow. But this time, it wasn't just a light. It was coming from something, a shape. It was incredibly faint, a dim luminescence against the oppressive black. It seemed to be moving, swaying gently. My heart hammered against my ribs. I don't know why, but I felt a primal urge to see what was there. I took one step, then another into the freezing, sweet-smelling darkness. My flashlight beam cut a small path in the gloom. I walked deeper, the silence pressing in around me, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then, the light intensified, just slightly. And I saw it. It was round, the size of a small child and faintly glowing with that same sickly sweet luminescence. It hovered a few feet off the ground, barely visible. It looked like a balloon, but it wasn't. Because as I stared, transfixed, a small, pale face, almost childlike, materialized within the sphere. Its eyes, impossibly wide and black, stared directly at me and from somewhere. A faint, high-pitched giggle echoed through the vast, empty space. It was not a child's laugh. It was something else. Innocent and playful, yet utterly devoid of warmth. I dropped my flashlight. It clattered to the floor, rolling away, leaving me in the pitch black. The glowing sphere pulsed once more and then completely vanished. The laughter, however, did not. It was everywhere now, seeming to come from the walls, the ceiling, the very air itself. I scrambled backwards, blindly bumping into racks and display cases, tripping over my own feet. The cotton candy smell was suffocating. I burst through the department store door, gasping for air, almost colliding with my relief security guard who had just arrived. He looked at me, concerned. / what's wrong, man? You look like you've seen a ghost. / I couldn't answer. I just shook my head, walked past him, and out into the biting morning air. I haven't been back to the mall since. The thought of those empty corridors, the lingering smell, the sound of that laughter, it's burned into my memory. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I swear I can still hear a faint, distant music box playing a tinny, sweet melody. The mall has a secret tenant, and I had the misfortune of disturbing it. The mall was supposed to be empty, a silent metal and glass tomb. But then I heard it. A whisper, just at the edge of hearing. What's the strangest, most unexplainable sound you've ever heard when you were sure you were the only one around? Let me know in the comments. The fluorescent lights hummed a low, constant lullaby above me, a sound that, over the past few weeks, had become as familiar as my own heartbeat. It was mid-August, hot and humid outside, but inside the sprawling, air-conditioned embrace of the Northwood Mall, it was always a comfortable 72 degrees. I just started my first proper job as a nighttime security guard after graduating high school. Most of my friends were either off to college or working summer jobs that actually got them out in the sun. Me. I was learning the rhythm of an empty shopping center, a rhythm that was surprisingly peaceful. My shift started at 9 p.m., right as the last stragglers were being gently ushered out by the closing staff. The first couple of hours were always the busiest, a dance of checking locked doors, ensuring no one was hiding in a changing room, and making sure the cleaning crew had everything they needed. By midnight, though, the mall truly belonged to me and the echoes of my own footsteps. This particular night, a Tuesday, was especially quiet. A quick glance at the schedule reminded me that my usual partner, an older gentleman named Frank who had a story for every creaky floorboard, was off sick. It was just me, the silent storefronts, and the vast, echoing silence around 1 a.m. I finished my first full patrol of the upper level. Everything was secure. The mannequins in the department stores stared blankly ahead, their plastic eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting. Downstairs, the food court tables gleamed under the soft glow of the kitchen vents. I grabbed a lukewarm coffee from the break room and settled into my usual spot near the main entrance, watching the security monitors. The screens showed static, unmoving images of empty corridors and darkened escalators. Nothing out of the ordinary. That's when I heard it. A faint clinking sound, like glass on glass, coming from the direction of the antique jewelry store on the lower level. My stomach tightened a little. Break-ins weren't common, but they weren't unheard of. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, the familiar weight of them a small comfort in the sudden silence. Security to base, I mumbled into the radio, my voice feeling strangely loud in the quiet. Checking disturbance on lower level, near timeless treasures. No response. I remembered Frank saying the radio sometimes had dead spots. Great. I started my descent down the main escalator, the metal stairs groaning softly under my weight. The clinking sound was clearer now, almost rhythmic. It sounded like someone was arranging small objects. My mind raced. Was it a cleaner I'd missed? Unlikely, they'd usually be gone by now. As I neared the jewelry store, the sound intensified. It was distinctly the sound of tiny metal charms hitting glass. With each step, a new, unsettling detail emerged. First, a faint, sweet smell, like old perfume and dust. Then, a soft, almost imperceptible humming, a low, wordless melody that seemed to weave itself into the ambient hum of the mall's ventilation system. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a loud drumbeat in the quiet. I held my breath, peering around the corner of the nail salon directly opposite Timeless Treasures. The display case of the jewelry shop, usually bathed in a soft interior light even at night, was completely dark. But through the ornate, wrought iron gate that served as the store's barrier, I could just make out a faint, silvery glow coming from the back of the shop. And the humming, it was coming from inside the jewelry store. I edged closer, flashlight beam steady. As I got directly in front of the gate, I lifted the light. The clinking stopped. The humming stopped. The world went absolutely still. My beam cut through the darkness of the store. Nothing. Just the rows of silent display cases, the velvet stands, the sparkling but unlit ornaments. I swept the light left, then right, then back, searching for any sign of movement, any shadow. That's when I saw it. On the floor, just inside the gate, lay a single, tarnished silver locket. It was open, and inside, two faded photographs of children stared out, a boy and a girl, their faces blurry with age. It wasn't just lying there. It was almost as if it had been placed there, perfectly centered within the small gap between the gate and the wall. And then I heard it again. A whisper, so soft it could have been my own breath or the static in my ears. It seemed to come from directly behind me, right over my shoulder. Lost, I spun around, flashlight beam cutting wildly through the empty corridor. My heart leaped into my throat. There was nothing. Just the silent shops, the polished floors, the distant hum of the mall's machinery. My breath hitched. The air around me suddenly felt colder, despite the mall's constant temperature. A shiver ran down my spine, one that had nothing to do with a break-in. This wasn't a person. I turned back to the jewelry shop, my eyes scanning the darkness, a new, primal fear beginning to bubble up. The open locket was still there, silver and dull against the dark floor. But now it was moving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it began to slide. It moved not towards me, but deeper into the store, as if being gently tugged by an invisible string. Just a few inches, then it stopped. My mind screamed every logical explanation. A draft, the floor wasn't level, I was imagining it. But the sweet, dusty smell was back, stronger this time, and I could feel a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I didn't wait for another whisper. I didn't wait for the locket to move again. I turned and ran, not a full sprint, but a fast, desperate jog. My feet pounded on the gleaming floor, the sound echoing endlessly behind me. I didn't look back until I reached the main security office, until I was safely behind the thick, reinforced door. I locked it, heart racing, and slumped into the chair, staring at the motionless security monitors. The coffee was stone cold. I finished my shift that night, going through the motions, but I avoided the lower level. Every distant clink, every faint hum of the air conditioning made me jump. When Frank returned a few days later, I tried to tell him. He just chuckled, blaming my active imagination and the loneliness of the night shift. But sometimes, when I'm alone in the mall at 1 a.m., and the lights are low and the silence presses in, I still hear that faint, sweet perfume. And sometimes, just sometimes, in the distant hum of the ventilation, I can almost hear a low, wordless melody, a mournful echo from the depths of timeless treasures. I never looked for that locket again. Some things are better left lost in the echoes of closing. The fluorescent lights of the mall always felt different after closing. During the day, they buzzed with a bright, welcoming hum, illuminating racks of colorful clothes and gleaming storefronts. At night, for those of us on the cleaning crew, they cast a sterile, almost harsh glow, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the silent air. My shift started at 11 p.m., 4 hours after the last shoppers scurried out, and ended just before the morning rush. For 6 months, it had been a routine I'd grown to tolerate, even appreciate for its quiet solitude. My assigned section was Department 7, the home goods and electronics section on the mall's furthest wing. It was a sprawling area, filled with displays of artificial plants, pressure cookers, and the occasional robotic vacuum. Most nights, it was eerily peaceful. The rhythmic hum of the ventilation system, the faint creaks of the building settling, and the distant drone of the floor buffer operated by a colleague near the food court were the only sounds. I preferred it that way. One Tuesday night, a cold drizzle had been falling all day, turning the usually bustling parking lot into a reflective, shimmering expanse. Inside, Department 7 felt even colder than usual. I was pushing my cleaning cart past a display of standing lamps, wiping down shelves methodically when I first heard it. A whisper. Faint, almost imperceptible, like someone sighing right behind me, I paused, cleaning cloth in hand, and glanced over my shoulder. Nothing, just the silent, inanimate mannequins in the next apartment, their painted smiles frozen. Must be tired, I muttered to myself, rubbing my eyes. The late hours could play tricks, but then it came again, clearer this time. A distinct, soft whimper, like a child trying to stifle a sob. My heart gave a little jolt. I looked around, my gaze sweeping over the aisles. Every security gate was down, every store locked. No one was supposed to be here but the night crew. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. The only response was the faint echo of my own word. A shiver traced its way down my spine. This wasn't the building settling. This was different. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight from the cart, its beam cutting a stark path through the shadowed aisles. I slowly walked towards the source of the sound, which seemed to be coming from deeper within Department 7, near the storage room for excess inventory. The room was always kept locked, only accessible to the stock team during the day. As I neared the locked metal door, the whimpering grew a little louder. It was definitely a child, and it sounded close. Panic started to bubble. How could a child be locked in here? Had someone forgotten them? The thought was terrifying. "Is anyone there?" I asked, my voice edged with concern now. "Hello, little one, can you hear me?" The whimpering stopped. A gasp replaced it, small and shaky. Then a voice, tiny and muffled, spoke from behind the heavy metal door. Mommy?" My blood ran cold. The word wasn't slurred or unclear. It was a simple, innocent question, but the tone. It wasn't the distressed cry of a lost child. It was flat, lifeless. "Your mommy's gone home, sweetie," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, even as my stomach twisted. "Are you stuck in there?" "I can call security, they'll help you get out." There was a pause, a long, chilling silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Then the voice came again, this time a little clearer, as if the child had pressed their face to the crack under the door. "No, she's not." "She's right here." Then I heard it. A faint thump from inside the locked room, followed by a slow, dragging sound. The kind of sound something heavy makes when it's being pulled across a concrete floor. My flashlight beam trembled in my hand. The air in the deserted mall suddenly felt thick, heavy, with an unseen presence. My logical brain screamed that it had to be a prank, maybe one of the younger guys on the crew messing with me. But the fear clinging to my bones told a different story. "Who is that with you?" I demanded, trying to sound firm, but my voice wavered uncontrollably. Another long silence. The dragging sound stopped. Then the small voice, no longer whimpering, but now a soft, almost playful giggle, drifted from inside. "He likes to hide." My breath hitched. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. A faulty intercom. Another employee already inside the locked room, playing a cruel joke? Neither made sense. No one was allowed in that room after hours. Then the doorknob rattled. Slowly, deliberately. Not someone trying to force it open, but as if an invisible hand was testing it, turning it back and forth. The heavy thud of my heart was all I could hear. I stumbled backward, my gaze locked on that rattling knob. This wasn't a lost child. This wasn't a prank. This was wrong. The sterile fluorescent lights suddenly seemed to flicker, though they didn't. The vast, empty space of Department 7 felt like it was closing in, the silence oppressive, the rattling stopped. And then, clearer than before, right from the other side of the door, I heard the small voice again. "Are you lost, too?" This time, the words were accompanied by a faint, rhythmic scratching sound, like fingernails dragging across metal. Panic seized me. Every instinct screamed to run. I didn't know what was in that room, but I knew I didn't want to find out. I dropped my flashlight, not caring as it clattered on the polished floor, its beams spinning wildly like a desperate eye. I turned and ran, my cleaning cart abandoned, my footsteps echoing thunderously in the cavernous mall. I didn't stop until I burst out the emergency exit, gasping for breath in the cold, drizzling rain, my uniform soaked, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I called in sick the next day, and the day after that. I told my supervisor I had a sudden family emergency. I told myself it was just sleep deprivation, a weird dream playing out in my waking hours. But I knew the truth. I resigned a week later, never stepping foot in that mall again. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the wind whispers outside, I still hear that small voice in my head. "Are you lost, too?" And I wonder, in the silent, dead hours before dawn, if that child is still in Department 7, waiting for someone to find them. Or if perhaps it's not the child that's lost at all. Maybe it's just looking for company. If you've ever felt that creeping dread of being truly alone in a vast, empty place, hit the like button. Let me know I'm not the only one who gets a chill from these stories. It was a Tuesday night, late September. The kind of night where the air outside already carried a crisp, autumnal bite, hinting at the long, dark nights to come. I remember it clearly because I'd just started working the graveyard shift at the old Northwood Mall, specifically as the overnight security guard. Most people probably picture some burly guy with a flashlight and a barking dog. That wasn't me. I was just a kid, really fresh out of high school, trying to save up for college. And Northwood Mall, deserted after 10 p.m., was like a ghost town. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. For the first few weeks, it was blissfully uneventful. I'd patrol the 3 levels, checking doors, making sure no one had somehow gotten locked in a fitting room. The main sounds were the low hum of the ventilation system, the occasional creak of the old building settling, and my own footsteps echoing on the polished marble floors. It was peaceful, almost meditative. Then October began to creep in, and with it, something else. It started subtly, so subtly I almost dismissed it. A flicker of light in one of the department stores on level 2. I'd be on level 1 doing my rounds, glance up the escalator bank, and see it just a brief flash, as if someone had switched a display light on and off in quick succession. I'd rush up there, heart thumping a little faster than usual, but find nothing. Every light off, every display exactly as it should be. The first few times, I convinced myself it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, or maybe a faulty wire. The mall was old, after all, but then the sounds began around 2 a.m. when the mall was at its absolute quietest. I'd hear them. Not loud, definitive noises, but whispers. The distinct click-clack of high heels on the tiled floor of the cosmetics section in Macy's. The soft rustle of clothes from one of the boutique shops. Sometimes, a distant, almost imperceptible chime, like the opening of a store door. Now, I knew for a fact every single store was locked down tight, alarms armed. No one was getting in or out. I'd shine my flashlight down the endless corridors, the beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating rows of mannequins that suddenly looked a little too lifelike in the eerie gloom. The silence that followed these sounds was always the most unnerving part. A heavy, suffocating silence that made the small hairs on my arms stand on end. One night, the sounds became much clearer. I was on level 3, checking the cinema exits, when I heard it, a distinct, rhythmic thump. It was coming from the food court on level 2, directly below me. It sounded like someone was bouncing a small, worn-out basketball. But who and why? I moved cautiously down the escalator, my hand gripping the cold rubber rail. The instant I stepped onto level 2, the bouncing stopped. My flashlight swept across the empty food court, past the overturned chairs and dark kiosks. Nothing. I was about to dismiss it as another echo, another trick of the old building, when I noticed something glinting under one of the tables. It was a single, silver high-heel shoe. Not a shoe from one of the stores. This one looked well-worn, like it had been walked in for years. And it was sitting there, perfectly placed, as if someone had just slipped out of it. My breath hitched. I knew the cleaners had swept this place spotless just before closing. I took a picture of it with my phone, my hands shaking slightly. And then, against my better judgment, I picked it up. It felt strangely warm, almost as if someone had just removed their foot from it. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of roses clung to the leather. I put it down, careful not to touch it again, and backed away slowly. The next few nights were a blur of heightened anxiety. I started doing my rounds faster, my eyes darting into every shadowed corner. The flickering lights intensified, the whispers became clearer, sometimes sounding like indistinct chatter, sometimes a soft, melancholy hum. And the click-clack of those high heels. They were almost constant now, always just out of sight, always moving away from me. Then came the night I saw her. It was just after 3 a.m. I was in the central atrium, looking up at the skylight, when I heard the distinct opening chime of a store door from the second level. It wasn't the usual faint sound. This was loud, clear, as if someone had just walked right in. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew it was the toy store, / Kids Kingdom. / I crept up the escalator, my flashlight off, relying on the emergency lights that cast long, distorted shadows. As I reached the top, I saw it. The automatic glass doors of / Kids Kingdom / were wide open. And inside, bathed in the faint, ambient glow from the mall, was a figure. She was slender, dressed in what looked like an old-fashioned, ankle-length dress, the kind you might see in a 1950s movie. Her back was to me, but I could make out her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. And on her feet, distinct even in the dim light, were a pair of silver high heels. She was standing in the doll aisle, her arm extended, as if reaching for something. The air in there felt frigid, despite the mall's internal heating. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. Excuse me, I croaked, the word barely a whisper. She didn't turn. but the hand she had extended slowly curled into a fist, then she pulled it back to her side. And then she started to hum. It was a lullaby, gentle and sad, a tune I didn't recognize, but it filled the cavernous space of the toy store. My mind screamed at me to run, to radio my supervisor, to do anything but stand there. But I was frozen, mesmerized by the eerie tableau. As she hummed, a single, small baby doll, still in its box on the shelf, slowly tilted its head. Then its eyes, painted wide and blue, seemed to fix directly on me. I gasped, the sound loud in the terrible silence that followed the lullaby. That's when the figure in the dress finally moved. Not turning, but slowly, fluidly sinking down, straight down as if melting into the floor. The humming faded, the high heels vanished, and in a matter of seconds, she was gone. The toy store doors slowly, silently, began to close. I didn't wait. I turned and ran, ignoring the screams that tried to claw their way up my throat. I ran until I was back in the security office, heart pounding, sweat slicking my skin. I never told anyone about what I saw, not really. I just put in my 2 weeks' notice that very morning, using /family as an excuse. I never stepped foot in Northwood Mall again after that. Sometimes, when a cold wind blows and the streetlights flicker, I still hear it, that faint, sad lullaby carried on the breeze. And I wonder about the phantom shopper of level 2. What was she looking for? What did she leave behind? And why, after all these years, do I still feel the urge to check over my shoulder whenever I hear the distant click-clack of high heels on a quiet night? The echoes of closing still ring in my ears, and the mall's secret tenant remains undisturbed. If you found yourself gripped by these true horror stories and wish to delve deeper into the darkness with us, subscribing is how you stay connected to every new tale. Just click that subscribe button